Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with life coach Linda Armstrong. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today when we are recording this on New Year's Day 2021. So happy New Year to all of our listeners and viewers everywhere. We really appreciate every one of you. And this was a quieter New Year's than people have experienced in many years because of COVID restrictions and so forth. My sister sent me a message, Linda, last night saying it was weird. She was looking at Times Square and it was empty. And, people are kind of dealing with all that stuff. Last year, we started off the year talking about how 2020 was going to be the year of clarity, to use the terminology that I used. And I think we certainly achieved a lot of clarity, not always clarity people wanted to achieve, but we definitely had a lot of clarity for the year. But what's 2021 going to be like? I mean, is this just going to be more of the same? What do you think is going to happen? What are we seeing for 2021?
Well, first, I'll just say Happy New Year, everybody. It's going to be a great one.
Happy New Year.
It's going to be a great one. It's going to be kind of strange and unusual, I would say, but ultimately it's going to be one of huge changes. It's still about truth and all that, but it's really getting back to what is it that's for our highest good, right? And I think that a lot of that's going to be unfolding. I think there's a lot of prosperity going to be coming to the planet. Again, clarity, and it's clarity like through truth, whatever that might be.
That pretty much summarizes what's been happening over the last, 10, 20 years or so. I mean, this has been a topic that you brought up to me on the show when you first came on, and you've been bringing it up ever since, that we're in this period of transition, is the way I would put it. Energy raising, or the planet raising its vibration, or however it gets phrased. But anytime that we have change that goes on along that kind of a line, or any kind of a line, change is uncomfortable. It just is. That's what happens when things change. It becomes and makes things uncomfortable. We've been going through a lot of discomfort, but change also leads potentially to some really great stuff. And so that's what I take from what you just said, that, yeah, there's a lot of change going on, but overall it's changed for the better.
And we've talked about how, like, a lot of things that don't seem like they're for our highest good when they're happening later on turn out to be, and that the earth is changing its vibration too. And so we'll see all kinds of things, even to do with things that the earth is producing, not just the people on it, right? That could be scary. Okay. But again, it's all like, we all signed up to be here right now. Like, we don't just come to a life haphazardly. There's a plan. Usually there always is. At least I believe there is. I don't have proof on that, except for my own like inner knowing of it. So you have to find your own, right? But yeah. And I think for a lot of people too, who weren't really sure, like, well, what is my purpose? Like, what am I really here to do? That was a lot of what last year was about. And a lot of people are finding that out for themselves. And some people are still on that journey trying to sort it all out. But I think that it will be sorted out as more of this kind of craziness comes to light.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you have over 7 billion perspectives, because that's just the human perspectives. That doesn't even count the animal life and the plant life and the insects and everything else. It's just 7 billion human perspectives.
Yeah, so and you know what? Before I lose the thought, I think we're also going to be seeing like ET disclosure this year too. It's like there's going to be like huge, humongous changes happening.
Okay.
And not necessarily changes, just things we didn't really know about that are going to come to light. That we'll learn more and more about.
I think that's a safe assumption any year, because that's the nature of growth. I mean, when you grow, more and more things come to light, more and more new things happen. So
yeah,
I think that's a safe assumption. But I'm intrigued by what you said about ET, ET coming to our awareness.
And you know what? And maybe also because you wanted to talk about a quote, which maybe you'll read, an Abraham thing about thoughts becoming thoughts, and those thoughts become more thoughts, and things come from
maybe I should just read that one, because you're right. That's the basis for the conversation. So why don't I just, you want to do this first? Okay, go ahead.
There is so much more awareness and consciousness around that we're not the only things living in this universe. And that energy has been growing and growing. And there are a lot of people who had thought disclosure would come out years ago. And so if you
Mhm.
ever pay attention to that community, which is constantly growing and growing, you'll see that that energy is really building. So that's why it feels like, at least from things that I've seen or heard of, that it might be, you know, even by this summer.
Okay. All right. Well, that could very well be. We will see what happens. Certainly, we do know thoughts become things. And if you get enough people thinking about stuff, it's going to turn into a manifestation at some point, sooner perhaps rather than later. So anyway, you made reference to this email and I shared it with you. I think it's time that we shared it with our listeners and viewers as well. This is an email that comes from Abraham Hicks. And for those who are already on the Abraham Hicks mailing list, you've already received this one. But Abraham Hicks sends out this email to anyone who subscribes to their list. They send out an email every day. And they're usually inspirational messages that are drawn directly from the Abraham workshops, key points, key ideas, and so forth. And the one that came today, I don't know if it was intended specifically for January 1st or not, but if it was, it's a very interesting way to start the year. So without further ado, let me read the email, and I'll read it slowly because it can be a little bit convoluted. It says, thought that is projected now thinks. So it's not possible to separate the thinker from the thought, because the thinker thinks a thought, and then the thought thinks and becomes a thinker. And then the thought that was a thought that is now a thinker thinks another thought, which becomes a thinker also. And so there is a constant summoning of life force. Now, a thought that is thought longer becomes thought form. A thought that is thought upon by many becomes thought form. A thought that is thought upon by many in a very clear, undiluted fashion, as from non-physical perspective, where there is no resistance, becomes physical matter. And that's why the physical universe is a byproduct of the non-physical attention or focus. So the non-physical energy that created this physical mass from the energy of the universe, the mass itself now becomes a thought that is thinking, that is attracting the energy. Raise your hand if you were confused, everybody. I know I was the first time I read it, but if you work through it carefully, here's what I take away from it. The big takeaway for me is just the act of thinking a thought not only creates the thought, but creates a thought that is itself conscious enough to create another thought. In other words, thinking from a conscious perspective also creates consciousness. Consciousness creates thought creates consciousness. It works both ways. And I have to admit, I hadn't quite thought of it that way. I mean, I know consciousness is in everything, right? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, how it's not just life isn't just in humans and animals and insects and so forth. I mean, there's consciousness and source energy in everything: rocks, trees, grains of sand, atmosphere, clouds, stars, open space, suns. You fill in the blank. It's full of source energy, and source energy is consciousness. But the idea that a thought spins itself into a new consciousness, if you will, or into an extension of consciousness, that's a really interesting concept. What did you take when you first read this?
But to me, that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a Buddha quote, and I looked it up because I don't want to say it wrong, but it says, all that we are, the results of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we become. Thoughts become things, right? I think he said it in a couple of different ways as well, but it's all about creation. That's how we create, through the thoughts and the feelings, which come from the thoughts, right? And which we have the creative ability to decide what that energy is behind that thought. That's how everything's here.
So that seems self-evident to you. It didn't seem all that surprising.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. That summarizes it.
That's a fun way to look at it, because then it requires thought to wrap your mind around those words and the thoughts that those words produce as you're reading them, right? Which is, again, thoughts, right? So you could, I guess, so this is coming in. You could look at that and be confused, or you could look at that and be like kind of excited to sort out how it how it plays a role. And then you start to realize, oh, yeah, so we really do create our own reality.
Yeah, yeah, in more ways than perhaps we realize. I think that I'm still I'm still grasping just how extensive this network of creativity that we're part of really is. It's just enormous. And the
Yeah.
enormity of it just keeps growing on me. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And you know what? You know what's coming to me too right now is that, so obviously we know that when you have like, you know, when you're in energies of like joy and excitement and wonder and all that, they're high vibrations, right? So it makes sense that as you're thinking thoughts through those energies, that oh, I lost what the message was. Maybe it'll come back. But you know, as you're thinking through those energies, you're putting so much more momentum behind what it is that you want. But see, it does work in the reverse too, because it also works when you're
Sure.
adding that negative energy to it, which is just again another example of how you actually really do get what you think.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. And it's a good reminder because that's exactly what does happen. We tend to overlook the fact that all energy levels of thought attract, they're just going to attract similar energy levels. I was really bringing that out actually in some conversations I was having online in one of the law of attraction groups where people were having trouble with the concept in general and how to apply it in their own lives and kind of overlooking that when we're in that low vibe state, we are still attracting. And you just described it very eloquently. So did Abraham in the message here. But that attraction happens in all ways. So all thoughts that we're putting out, and then this is the part that I find to be a bit mind-boggling. All the thoughts that we put out, whether we label them positive or negative, doesn't really matter because source energy really doesn't consider any thought to be positive or negative. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
It's just a conscious creation is all it is. But no matter what we're putting out, we are creating new consciousness along that same vibrational line. So if we
Yeah.
keep putting out low vibrational stuff, we're creating more and more consciousness in the vibrational realm. If we put out
Yeah.
more high vibrational stuff, we're creating more consciousness in the high vibrational realm.
Right. So it's like, do we want to, you know, you enjoy those thoughts of things that you really want to happen that bring you joy. You know, you enjoy those thoughts, right? You can feel it. And you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
you hate those thoughts, which take you in the total opposite direction. And you hate the way that feels. So why not follow the joy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Why
Yeah.
not consciously follow the joy instead of subconsciously following the fear? It's that same thing. It's the light and the dark. It's like what all this is about with all the changes on the planet. It's like there's so much light coming that the dark is coming up to the surface and it's being dissipated. Well, hopefully, I think that's what's happening. You know, like I'm good with that story. You know,
I think so. Well, if we think it is so that it's true, we're creating that as part of consciousness. So then it is true because we're thinking it.
Yeah.
It's pretty
So
straightforward.
that's why the more that you get into your heart, no matter what the thing is that's on your mind, but as more that you get into your heart, then the chances are that those things that are of the higher vibration, like of the heart, will come into creation in some way, shape, or form that is actually pleasing to the heart, to that energy of love. Even if it comes out in a totally different way. So that's happened sometimes too. But you could be holding the vibration and the energy of something that you want to create, and actually something else gets created, but it feels the same, if not even better sometimes, right?
Yeah, oh, sure.
So that there shows you how, you know, so say it's maybe somebody looking for a new job and they're excited about it and they think they're going to this field, but then their energy is so high and then they get all these opportunities for something that maybe is somewhat related, but not exactly what you were looking for. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, but that sounds pretty good, right? Because the heart will lead us to what's right for us.
So let me ask you a question then about the role that lower vibe stuff plays in all of this. Because like you were describing, we have the opportunity at any given time to make our choice. Are we going to focus more attention on the stuff that feels good to us, or are we going to focus more attention on the stuff that feels not so good to us or even bad to us? And I think it's fair to say that overwhelmingly, the people who have come into this world as humans in human form have chosen on a regular basis, at least after they got here. I don't know if they made the decision before they got here, that becomes a whole question about soul contracts, I guess. But at least after they got here, they decided to spend a whole lot of time focusing on stuff they don't like. I mean, this is like a global phenomenon. It's been going on for millennia.
Yeah.
This is
But
not
I
new.
think that, yeah, but that's what I wrote down immediately when I said that was, it always leads you to what you prefer.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, it always
Assuming that
leads
we're
you,
willing to go there.
I think it
I-
always will lead you in some way to what you prefer. Even if you don't want to go there, you might still have the awareness of what you would prefer and then not allow yourself to go there. So that gets into all kinds of programming that you might be carrying that doesn't allow you to be happy or whatever that might be. Right.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
and then I like what Abraham says too, is just find a thought that feels a little bit better, you know, like just
Yeah.
shift in the tiniest little bit of a way, and that shift will allow that energy to grow. Doesn't mean you can't just do it like this, because I know I've done it like that. But you know, I it was like a year and a half ago or so, I realized how, even though I know everything I know, I was totally feeding a fearful thought.
Yeah,
And then
exactly. Well, that's what we do. So that's what I
Yeah.
was identifying. We do that regularly. We're used to this.
Right. But then I woke up to it. I'm like, you could just do the little, you know, well, this feels a little better. What if this, what if this, what if this? And I'm like, oh, fuck that. I'm not going down that. And why did I spend, because I know better. Why did you spend so much time thinking about that stuff? You know?
Yeah.
And it's almost like a part of me woke up and said, I have no clue, but I'm not doing it anymore.
Right.
You know? It's like, boom. Then I just flipped that switch. I just flipped it. I mean, I talk about that a lot. You can just flip the switch on something. I know, because I've done it. And in doing that, it changes everything.
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
It definitely changes everything. And the other thing is, the more often that we do focus our attention on stuff that we like, the easier it is to flip that switch. I know that before I started learning all this stuff, and I think everybody could identify with this in one way or another, I could latch on to some sort of negative thing and turn it into a spiral. And it could go months, it could go years in that spiral. But that was in a time when I was spending a large chunk of my time just focusing on stuff I didn't like. Once I learned to start changing the mindset around, those periods of downward spiral last a lot shorter.
Yeah. So how did that serve you?
It served me in a big way to teach me that I had control over my experience. I love that part. I got to make the decision. And even though I don't necessarily see it immediately by making a change in thought, by deciding to think differently, in the long run, I always see the difference. I always experience the difference. And therefore, in that way, I'm able to directly experience the idea that, yes, I can control my life experience just by changing my thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a situation that happened many years ago with a bunch of women that I was, friends with. And this one thing that happened got so blown out of proportion. And I went way down that spiral and creating all these stories in your head and all this about how wrong they are. And I mean,
Sure.
And then it eventually did get cleared up, but it was a waste of like 2 weeks of my life. So I can look back at that and think, oh my God, I totally created that. I didn't have to go down that. I could have cleared that up way sooner. And that also teaches you how to be able to then move into maybe understanding or even forgiveness, rather than build a story into something that it isn't even anymore. Because that's what happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who don't know what we know about this kind of stuff will take something, maybe they feel that they were wronged, and they'll take the actual event and add all these pieces to it that actually didn't happen.
Yes, right.
But they actually really didn't happen. And it changes the whole thing out of proportion. And then you have these two sides. Actually, I've seen this with my mom and one of her sisters, where they had this disagreement and it separated them for the rest of their lives. My one aunt died. They never resolved it. And it was all taking an event and building their own stories around it to make them so big that they could not see each other's place anymore. You know what I mean? That didn't have to be.
That's true. You made an interesting comment too. And that was that you went through that downward spiral and you basically wasted 2 weeks of your life. And I know exactly what you mean, because I've often felt and said the same thing. But as you pointed out a few minutes ago, you didn't actually waste it. You were simply setting yourself up for what you did like. But isn't it interesting? We do think of it the way you thought of it, that, oh, that was a waste of my life. I blew that 2 weeks. And yet when we look back 5 years later, we say, well, I didn't really blow it. I learned very clearly what it was I didn't want. And it led to some stuff that I really did like a whole lot. So it's funny how this
Absolutely.
stuff works.
So
Yeah.
now if there's some kind of disagreement on something, I can be like, well, all right, well, let me see what the other side is saying or thinking or doing. I don't have to agree with it, but I
Sure.
can at least see it.
Yeah.
And the trick is not to go into judgment,
Yes.
even when that is so different from your reality, because why not allow other people to they can have their reality,
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that judgment piece is a big piece, because when we can get to the point where we just kind of let go of all that, just kind of take that, it's what the stream of David calls the zoom back perspective. You zoom back far enough and you don't really get all worked up about whatever the politics of the thing are. You just, okay, different people have different perspectives on whatever it is, and that's okay. And every one of them is valid. When you get to that point, that makes it a whole lot easier to stay in the high vibe. Makes it a
Yeah.
whole lot easier.
Well, and the higher you can stay in your vibe, the clearer I think you can actually see. And then
Yeah,
you'll
well,
either know,
sure.
you know more what your truth is, or maybe you can be like, oh, I didn't consider that, or whatever it might be, you know?
Well, isn't clarity one of the words that Abraham uses to describe the top level of vibration in their 22-point scale? I mean, they're all equivalents. They're like joy, happiness, clarity, appreciation, knowledge, and some other one. I can't remember what they are, but they're all considered that top level of vibration on that scale. So yeah, you're right. I mean, clarity is a huge part of it. It makes a lot of sense. When we're in a low vibe place, we can't see much of anything, can we? I mean, it's
No.
hard to see beyond that immediate feeling that we've got to see anything that's going on anywhere. I've had conversations with people who are in pretty deep depression, and I would ask them things like, well, can you remember the last time when you felt good? And they couldn't remember. It may have
Yeah.
been 3 days ago, but they just couldn't remember it, because you get so locked into that really low vibe feeling.
And I'd
But when you're in the
say,
high clarity feeling, you can see all of it.
even everything, not only does it feel heavy, I think everything kind of looks darker.
Oh, yes.
You know how when
Very
you
much
come
so.
out of something, you're like, wow, it got so bright in here, but it's the same lighting that it was
Exactly.
5 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
But you have this
Yeah.
realization, like that happens in healing sessions all the time. The light in the room doesn't change, but the light in your body does. And so when you open up and you carry more light, everything's brighter, because when you're so caved in, yeah, things actually look dark, like through your physical eyes even.
Yeah, it is true. It's amazing how big of a difference that can be too. I think one of the best ways of describing when the opposite happens, when it becomes really clear, is if I'm in an excited situation, something I'm really happy about, or just plain excited because there's a lot of fun activity going on or whatever, colors seem brilliant in those scenarios. Colors seem to just jump off the page, so to speak, or jump off of the material or whatever it is. Whereas when you're in the depressed state, bright yellows, bright oranges, they just seem like browns. They just seem so, ugh.
No, yeah,
I
it's
don't know why
true.
that is, but it's true.
And like I can relate it to, like, when I have someone come in to see me, when I can see them and they do look, I'll say dull. It feels heavy,
Really?
but it's like looks a little dull. Then we have the session, and then poof, they
Yeah.
bright. It's almost as if the guy's eyes are kind of glazed over, but then the light comes in and it's like they're sparkling. Now,
Yes.
and then it made me think, okay, so not everybody has that experience, because not everybody does this kind of work, but you can see it, say, in a little kid who's upset about something. And then you tell them something that would change the whole story for them. And then don't you see them brighten up? It's like
Yeah,
night and day.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I can think of a story that Sean Aker, the positive psychology guy, tells about when he was, I think, 7 years old, something like that, with his sister Amy, who was a couple years younger and still is a couple years younger. That's part of his joke. But but he tells the story about how they were playing war, him with his soldiers, his GI soldiers, and her with her little pony, and, unicorns and that kind of thing. And at one point during the events, they were on a bunk bed, and apparently Amy kind of lost her grip and fell off over the side of the bed and landed on both her hands and her knees at the same time. So she landed on all fours. and Sean could see that she's about to let out a scream of pain. And he had been charged with his parents to play quietly, so he didn't want to get in trouble. So he said, Amy, don't cry. Don't you see what just happened? You landed on all fours. A human can't do that. Amy, I think you're a unicorn. And he said he could see the conflict in her head, like on the one hand, screaming pain, on the other hand, the possibility of being a unicorn that she'd never experienced before. And eventually the unicorn won out, and she was able to clamber back up on top of the bunk with all the grace of a unicorn with a broken leg.
Right.
Because, she just saw it differently. She felt differently. Right. And right. In that feeling differently, she experienced the world differently.
Yep, whole different perspective.
That's right. I mean, talk about mind over matter. She had a broken leg, for God's sake. And she didn't act like she had a broken leg.
Yeah, that's a great illustration.
It is a good illustration, yeah. I think it's probably more extreme than what many of us have pointed to in our past, but we can all think of times where, just anything that was a particularly light or particularly dark segment or scene or experience, we remember the really good feeling ones. We remember them brightly, right? I mean, that's part of the way the memory is. The ones that were unpleasant, depressing, angry, frustrated, violent, perhaps, they always have a real dark timbre to them in our memories. No matter how positive they may have been in some ways, as long as we thought of them as negative, they just seem dark. They just seem physically dark. Yeah.
Yep.
Really interesting. So taking then the Abraham Hicks message that got sent out, thoughts becoming thoughts that create new consciousness, that become thoughts, that becomes another consciousness, that becomes a new thought. Well, besides the mind-boggling aspect of that, what happens when we apply that to this concept of positive vibration, negative vibration? Clearly what's happening is when we are focused on the good feeling stuff, we're accentuating that. And so it's creating kind of like almost like an echo effect. It just keeps building. And similarly, when we're focusing on something that is not good feeling, it also has a building effect, but it's like building. It's like, ugh. You can see it building both ways. It builds brightly or it builds darkly.
So maybe that could be just the tool. If you can have the presence of mind, which we always can if we choose to.
True. Yep.
to decide at this moment, well, do I want to build this up to what possibilities could come from it, or do I want to what positive possibilities can come from it, or do I want to wallow in what negative things could come from it? It's at this point where it can go either way. Anything can always go either way. It's just what do we choose to feed it towards?
Yeah.
And what do we choose to feed to it?
Yeah. That's true. So what this is all adding up to is, for me anyway, it's adding up to showing us how powerful we are with our conscious minds and our conscious thoughts. Much more powerful than perhaps we would have realized. And simply not just showing how powerful the thoughts are, but how powerful it is to have a thought that leads to a thought that leads to a thought that leads to a thought. In other words, what's one of the things that people bring up when they're asking about, they're early in the process of learning how to be a conscious creator, learning how to attract what they want into their lives. Well, should I keep asking for the same ask over and over again? That's like one of the first questions that people ask. And apparently the answer is, well, if you keep following a thought by a thought by a thought by a thought, assuming that it's relatively in the same vibrational area, you're going to keep building that vibration. So really the question isn't whether or not you should keep going with it. The question is, does it feel good to you or does it feel bad to you? If it feels good, go with it. If it feels bad, be careful. you may not want where it goes.
And that's where people get caught up, because what was coming to me is sometimes the thing that you think you want is not for your highest good. So if we were just to be open to whatever that guidance is that wants to come through, we'll follow what feels right and might take us in a different direction. Like we started saying that in the very beginning, right? So what happens though is sometimes people don't realize when they're feeding the energy to the thing that they really want, they don't always notice when that energy no longer feels good. So that's something you want to pay attention to, because if that energy no longer feels good as you're wanting to feed it good energy, but you can't get to the good energy because you keep getting this lower energy come in, then you might want to look at it like, well, maybe is there another way to do this? Because why why do I keep feeding energy to this, but it's not happening, and it's creating this really bad feeling for me, which is going to make it not happen even more. What if I were to look at that as to, is there another way I can look at this and feed energy to this? Because possibly there's something else that wants to come in that's better for my highest good. So that gets back down to like just trusting, allowing, and having faith. So you want to combine the two things. It's like, so when things are going south on something, you might want to say instead, not like, what am I doing wrong, or why isn't this happening? Maybe ask the question, okay, what is it about this I'm just not seeing?
Yeah.
That's actually for my highest good, that maybe wants to take me in another, a little bit off the course I set. Maybe there's a little bit better course for me. And you don't always have the presence of mind to do that because you're so focused on this other outcome. And a lot of times, okay, so this is what's coming through. So I'm going to say it. Sometimes you're focused on that outcome, not necessarily for yourself, but because you've been told that that's what's best for you.
Oh God, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you want to prove maybe that you can, that whatever somebody else thinks is best for you is best for you, but it's just not happening. That's when you really have to go within and say, well, hold on, wait a minute. This isn't happening. I'm hitting my head against the wall. Is this something I really do want? Is this really what I want? Is this for my highest good? Or universe, is there something else? And then just open up even the slightest bit to allow what maybe wants to come through that would change the direction, which will change your whole energy around it if you just allow it to happen.
What you're describing sounds very much like the analogy of the aircraft pilot. When a commercial aircraft pilot is piloting a plane, 95% of the time they're off course because they're constantly adjusting the course. You know, they're like a degree of course, and they find, oh, they're too far to the east, so they change a little bit to the west, and they find, oh, they're a little too far west, they pull to the east. Oh, I'm a little bit too far to the north, I'll pull down a little bit. I mean, they're constantly adjusting the course. Well, in order to adjust the course, you have to pay attention to the feedback you're getting from your instruments. And the instruments you're talking about in this case is that internal guidance. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what a good pilot does. A good pilot's constantly checking to see, am I on course?
Right. And so like 2020 was all about going within, right? Seeing what is true for you, finding out, getting clearer about, what is it that is your truth, that is right for you, right? So yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's just having the presence of mind to look at something and think, oh, maybe there's a better way to achieve that or something similar to that. Or maybe I don't even want it. I'm just doing it because my parents want me to, or my husband wants me to, or whatever. Or I
Let me
feel like I
bring in
need to
some.
prove myself in some way, like, or I have to keep up with some other people when I'm not really interested in that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me bring in another piece that I've been working on the last few days. I've been doing a lot of work in preparation for doing some public speaking, and so putting together my first talk. You're always supposed to have to outline a complete talk that you can give, and then break it down to pieces for shorter talks and so forth. And one of the key concepts that I'm finding myself coming back to over and over and over again is the importance of self-love. Because self-love, that ties into self-image and self-confidence and self-esteem and all the self-dash stuff. They're all connected to that. And one of the things that we talked about on the show a couple days ago had to do with the connection between self-love and vibration on the one hand, and the connection between self-love and conscious creation, and also the connection between self-love and being stuck, for lack of a better term. I mean, we talked about a moment ago, being so focused on something that we don't like and not allowing ourselves to consider what is it that we prefer instead. So we just kind of get stuck on that old tape, that old program. So I just wanted to get like a little bit of input from you, a little bit of thought about what role do you see self-love playing in this whole process of what we're talking about here, this thought conscious creation process?
Yeah. So the first thing that came to mind, and I wrote it down, was, can you love yourself enough to fail?
Ooh, I love it. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let that one sink in. Maybe that was for you. That's the message that came in when you were saying that. Love yourself enough to fail. So
Got to write that one down.
however you feel that beyond your mind is all you need. So, it made me think of what's her name? Breen Brown. Breen Brown. She did that whole thing, and I don't really know too much about it, but I think she went on stage and she got so vulnerable and just was her truth. And maybe it was that particular talk that she did, and I probably messing this up, but you might want to check that out for yourself.
Sure.
It led her to all this work about allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So that's kind of like that loving yourself to fail. It's like,
Right.
you know what, really just being true to yourself, not having to follow a formula or a script, and just because the words will always come, I think. And trusting that, and you've been around this kind of stuff for so long, you're speaking all the time, the right words will come. Even if they feel like they're wrong at the time, they're probably right. Because I think what happened for her is she blew up after that. Like blew up in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that, because when you just get out of that having to have it be a certain way, and maybe you have this whole thing planned, but somehow you start talking about something else. So you have to love yourself enough to go with it and not think, oh, I got to get back on course. Because probably, and I would say probably you might be picking up on the energy in the room that needs it to go that way. And that's why it's coming out. Like kind of, if somehow I don't know why this is coming out, okay, but this is what's coming to me. Somehow you find yourself maybe sometimes we get off course and we're like, how the heck did that happen? This is what I planned to talk about, or this is what I plan to do in my life, but now somehow I'm over here.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, well, somehow you're over there. So you, and who knows, your guidance are steering you there. So let's look at what's good about this and go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not a public speaker, but I kind of feel like you can never go wrong when you just follow what wants to come out.
That's true. And I've experienced that, like you said, here on the podcast. One of my earliest ways of doing it, and I've done it a lot now, is, we're in the middle of a conversation, we've got a topic going, and all of a sudden there's a blank. Like, okay, I got to fill some space here. What am I going to fill it with? I don't know what I'm going to say. So one day I decided to just open my mouth and see what would come out. I'm going to start talking. And when I did, it was a little bit halting at first, but I played it back later on and I was amazed at how much sense it made. I thought it was gibberish that was coming out. It wasn't gibberish at all.
You know what? It's funny. Sometimes on some of the videos I do, when I'm giving readings and all, and I start, who knows, whatever starts coming out. And a lot of times you might hear me on the video saying, I have no idea what I just said, or if any of this makes any sense, or if I'm even going to publish this video. And I always do. I always do. Because when I play it back, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But in my mind, is like, because my mind didn't keep up with the words were just coming out. And I'm like, I have no idea if any of this ever even made any sense.
Yep.
But you hear it back, like you just said, and it's like, oh, no, that was pretty good.
Yeah, right. Gee, I'm smarter than I thought it was.
And that's that whole thing of just allowing it to flow.
Yeah. Jenny in the live stream was asking about the spelling, and it looks like Brene Brown is Brene with an apostrophe, and then Brown, Brown.
I think so.
Yeah. So
Brene Green. I don't know how it's said, but there's something.
That looks right.
Yeah. I think she has one really famous TED Talk or something like that. And then since then, I know she does a lot with, I think it's vulnerability. I forget how she terms it.
On her website, the key phrase is courage is contagious. Every time we choose courage, we make everyone around us a little better and the world a little bit braver.
Yeah. So when things you think are falling apart, but you have the courage to go with it and stand up and speak your truth, it all changes. But
right. Yeah. So very interesting. I hadn't heard of Brene Brown. That's an interesting.
To be vulnerable, to allow your vulnerabilities is to be really having courage to be able to do that.
Yes.
That's I think where she's coming from.
In fact, as soon as you said that, it occurred to me, somebody who is in that depressed state that we talked about a few moments ago, where they can't really see much of anything else, at that moment in time, they're actually not feeling any courage about being vulnerable. At that point, they're really just hiding off from being vulnerable and not wanting to deal with it, wanting to shut the whole thing down and just run away from it, so to speak. So that vulnerability is really a way to get to the higher vibration state. That's what makes it so powerful, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really to go into that question of, okay, what about this am I not seeing that is actually like steering me in the right direction or for my highest
Mm-hmm.
good, or however you want to phrase it for yourself. And just, when you ask questions, you give it to the universe, you get out of your head trying to figure it out, and you just open more to allowing things to just flow.
That's part of the non-judgmental stance, isn't it? Because what actually happens when we become judgmental about anything is we're closing ourselves off, aren't we? We're closing
Well,
ourselves off
if you're
from a
judging
possibility we
yourself,
don't like.
if you're judging yourself, you're not giving yourself self-love at that moment, are you?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the one subject of our judging that we do the most judging of? It's ourselves. I mean, we are the harshest critics of ourselves, of anybody that there is. Nobody judges ourselves as hard as we do. So yeah, a bit of a reminder there for all of us. And good input too. I'm going to use some of this stuff in my talk. So thank you for that.
And what that brings up directly for me right now is for the past week, even today, I was gonna create a video today. I'm like, I just can't. I for some reason I can't do anything right now.
Okay.
I can't work on promotion. I'm not. It's almost like spirit saying, no, you need to chill and do nothing. Like I actually took this whole between Christmas and New Year off of my calendar, nothing available. And I have a hard time with doing nothing sometimes, I think I need to be more productive or whatever. But it's like, even if my mind is telling me you need to, like today, no, you need to create a video. I'm like, yeah, it's not happening.
That's actually resonating with me on a couple different levels because, like I said, I'm in the process of writing my sort of my extended talk, I guess you might call it, that I can break up into pieces. And in that extended talk, one of the key things, I've been reading a bunch of books by people telling you, here's how you become a successful public speaker and get paid for it and all that kind of stuff, get lots of gigs. And one of the points that they were making is you want to try to include not only stories, but where possible, your own story. And particularly that part of your own story, which was troubling or difficult or painful or challenging, because that in order to tell that story, you have to be vulnerable. And that's where you're going to get the greatest buy-in from your listening audience. So I realized, okay, I knew what stories I needed to tell, particularly one story that I needed to tell, because my initial talk is aimed at college students. And specifically, the topic that I'm addressing is the stresses and pressures and anxieties associated with being in college. So I needed to tell a story that tied back to my own college experience. And I knew exactly which one it was. It was my first year of college. My freshman year was the year from hell. No, there's no nice way to put it. It was a horrible year. I learned a lot from it in the long run. Took many years to learn a lot from it, but I did. But at the time, it was just miserable to go through because I lived in a 4-man room, 4 men in one room, and 2 of them turned out to be the biggest drug dealers on campus. You can just imagine what that turned into. It was horrific. It was awful. But that story I could tell was going to be a great way for me to connect to my potential audience. So I knew I had to tell the story. The problem was I didn't want to have to go back and revisit it again. So literally, like you just said, for the last 5-6 days, I've been putting it off. No, I just don't want to do it. I'm just not up for doing that. I'm not up for doing that. And finally, today, I actually started to write it. And the way I did it was I did my normal morning routine. I do mirror exercises. I have a video that I watch. I do just a whole bunch of stuff to get my vibe up. And I kind of put extra time and effort into it to really get myself to a high vibe place. And then as soon as I got there, I said, okay, let's go write. Just start writing. And I started writing. And I got I don't know, almost all of the thing written. And I was exhausted emotionally by the end of it because it was such a dense, difficult topic. And then I walked away from it and I said, oh, geez, I don't know. I can't do anymore. And the thought that immediately came to my head was, yeah, but you got it out. You got it out.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah.
You wrote it. I said, yeah, but it's not done yet. And the answer came back, it doesn't matter that it's done yet. You got it on paper. You now can work with it later on.
Maybe part of the story too is revisiting it and how you had to go through all of that again, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's always a therapeutic aspect to it, provided that I'm willing to let go of it. But yeah, there's always that therapeutic aspect. So yeah. And it also reminded me, I don't have to do the whole thing at once. I mean, in this case, I actually got that freshman year story out all at once. I left out sophomore, junior, senior year, and what happened after graduation. Those are further chapters of the story because there was a bunch of stuff there too. But I don't have to write the whole thing at once. I can just get that bit out and then go off and build my energy back up and relax for a bit. I don't have
Yeah.
to get it all done
You
at
know what?
once.
And just ask your guidance. Okay, let me know when it's time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know for me, the most success I have with things that I do is when I stop trying to do it and just allow it to just come as it comes. I'm finding for me, especially with the kind of work that I do, that's the way I have to do things now.
I hear what you're
I
saying.
just have to let it come in as it comes in, because then it not only does it feel right and it feels easy. I'm not trying to make anything happen at that point. It just happens. The tricky part for me is, I've always had this thing with patience, is having the patience for when that moment comes.
Well, that's a word that can work two different ways, because I'm thinking about how I tend to react to it. In this case, I didn't have any trouble having the stuff come out. The stuff was pouring out at me. I mean, it was not a lot of effort to write. The biggest effort was, could I keep up with everything that was coming out and get it onto the page? That wasn't the hard part. The hard part for me was just going through the process of getting that all out and then taking a breather, because, oh my God, so much emotion attached to that I didn't like. And I just wanted to get away from it because it was just too much.
You see how much so much healing came from that, because you were in the flow. Like, you couldn't stop writing it. I bet you couldn't stop writing. Right.
Absolutely.
You couldn't stop writing.
I actually had to stop myself, actually. I had to just say, okay, break, go away. Just stop.
That was a total healing session for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'll probably have a better perspective on that next week, but I'll take it at your word right now.
Listen, if emotion was coming up like that while you were doing it and it was flowing so much, it was meant to be that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. That sounds a lot better than what it felt. So that's good.
I mean, writing things out and going through the emotions of whatever wants to come up with whatever words want to come out, you're actually just channeling what needs to come out. And in doing that, you felt the emotion. Feeling the emotion is releasing the emotion. When I work with people and there's things that we're working towards, the body will give emotions or things will turn on, like pains or discomfort or pressure will turn on, because it's letting me know there's resistance there. And then we release it. Just being with the energy. Like, you don't need to have a healer telling you processes to let it go. Just being with the energy and allowing it to be is allowing it to go. We all can do this for ourselves. It's actually very easy. And I'm just pointing it out for you that you just did it, whether you know it or not.
Well, intellectually, what you're saying makes sense to me. Emotionally, my emotions are still saying, yeah, but I feel so terrible from later on or from earlier on. But intellectually, yeah, I know what you're saying is true.
Right.
I've heard this before. I know that it's true.
Maybe you could say, thank you, Spirit, for having me go through all of that.
Thank you so much for putting me through all that. No, that's not what you meant. I know.
No, truly, thank you. Have gratitude for it. Yeah, because
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, emotions are amazing things. So okay, well that was a pretty good exploration off of that one thought that Abraham Hicks gave us about thoughts, creating consciousness, creating thoughts, creating consciousness, creating thoughts, creating consciousness. We create a whole bunch of it here. Wow,
right. And
really
so
cool.
It's just another example of how when you just allow the energy to flow, stuff comes out.
Yeah, it really does.
It just does. I'm sure that the things we were just saying throughout all this time will hit certain people in certain ways and help them. We didn't have a plan.
That out.
Yeah, we never have a plan. We just do it, you know?
You've pointed that out on many occasions, and it has proven on those occasions where we got the input back or the feedback that told us that it happened, it has proven itself over and over again. Sometimes, obviously, we just don't get the feedback. We don't really know. But I think that the pattern of feedback has shown pretty clearly, yeah, there is always somebody out there who needs it, especially as our audience keeps growing, which it has been doing. So if all of that emotion that I went through earlier today actually helped somebody else, I guess it was worth it.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't like it, on that point alone, it was worth it.
We don't always like it. but it still releases.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I did get it out. That was good. It's interesting too. It did give me a way to kind of create. You know how we create like a what the psychologist would call that Gestalt view, that overall, like that 10,000-foot view, so to speak. It gave me the 10,000-foot view of that whole year to actually do that writing out. I mean, I knew all the pieces of it, but to see the whole thing kind of fit together, I don't know. I still don't know what it is actually going to do for me to have gotten that out, but I could see the completeness of it. And that completeness has to lead to something. I just
It will.
don't necessarily know what it
It
is.
will lead to something. And another
Yeah.
thought that came in just now, as we were talking about, like you go through some kind of an upset. So maybe it's a divorce or like a breakup of some sort, getting fired from a certain job or whatever. Like that thing that feels so bad, you may not realize it, but part of what feels, allowing yourself to be in that energy is releasing energy from something that may have happened in your past, in another lifetime, right? It all has purpose. So if it all has purpose, it's all leaning towards ultimately you bringing in more light and releasing the darker energies.
Yeah. I'm
So when you're
reminded
feeling that
that,
much emotion, you're releasing darker energies.
right, right. And I'm reminded of the Abraham Hicks quote on that. You can't get it wrong, and you'll never get it done. That's the way of saying, like you said earlier, there's no judgment attached to any of this. We're the ones who are doing the judging just by saying we like it or don't like it. And that's, we're entitled to decide what we like and what we don't like. But nevertheless, the energy itself is just energy. It's just thought, conscious creation going on and on and on and on. And the more that we can allow it to be just that creation unto itself, the more that we become the conscious creator that's in control, which is, it sounds almost contrary to say that. And yet that's where the control comes from. It comes from maintaining that higher perspective at all times.
And now I can't think of anything specific right now, but how many times have you had it where, okay, either something that happened in the past, you revisit it with a bunch of people talking, yeah, remember that time? And maybe you thought it was a horrible thing, but here you are with your friends cracking up, laughing over it, right? Or even, have you ever been in an argument with somebody and they say something that makes everybody laugh? And you're like, no, I don't want to laugh. I'm really mad right now. And then you can't stop yourself from laughing. Right?
You ruined a perfectly good argument.
It's like, okay, now what the heck was I upset about? Because it's just energy, it just blew off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, actually, I've been the one who said some of those lines sometimes just to break up, the whole stream, because I wanted to break up what was going on there. But you're right. It's almost annoying when you still have your points to make and the other person broke it up by saying something funny, like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, I've totally had that. And I think sometimes it was the other person knowing that they could crack me up right now and would change everything.
Of course. Well, yeah. Push the button a little bit there.
I'm laughing, but I'm really mad.
That's right. Well, it answers the question, doesn't it? Can you feel different emotions at the same time?
Yeah. And can you flip them from one to the other? Absolutely.
And can you flip them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are amazing creatures. We are not just creatures, we are also creators. We're amazing creators / creatures. We are both.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, we've got about 6 minutes left in the show before we sign off for the day. Let's talk just for a brief moment. We talked earlier in the show about what we're looking for, that there's going to be some really big change going on this year. From a vibrational perspective, I know that you've mentioned before that we have, as a planet-wide, been going through these big vibrational shifts. Rita talks about that too, and we'll be getting Rita back next week, of course. Do you see anything specific coming up, say, in the next month or two, vibrationally speaking? Do you see any big changes going on, or is it just going to be more of the same for a while?
I feel like there's something really big, but I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be more of the same, but I think it might get even more intense. But it's going to be like, it's almost like it might feel intensely bad, but just like we were just talking about, but then get intensely good.
Okay, like a slingshot effect.
Like we were just saying, I'm mad, but then somebody does something that makes you laugh, and you're like, I can't be mad anymore. It's just like I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but this is what it feels like to me, is that there's going to be some kind of, it's going to be good, whatever that is. I can't even find the words, but maybe that's why I didn't do an energy update yet, because I haven't been able to really make sense of the energies.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because you're the one who has to be able to translate it, so that makes sense.
So, when I can read it better, I'll be reading it.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
give us a clue next week. You'll probably have a better idea by then. You probably have already done your video by then.
Now, I think we're having my friend Keiko on, and she's an animal
Oh, that's
communicator.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us
That'll
about
be
Keiko.
fun. Well, Keiko, she's been a client of mine, and she's really had these gifts that she stepped into even more and more fully since I've known her. And she's worked with my animals, and she's helped them remotely. She's in Texas. I'm in New York, right? She works with a lot, she works with humans as well, not just animals, combining the spiritual and her intuition and the energy, that the healing energy that she has access to, as well as her vast knowledge of homeopathy and natural remedies. She has a farm. I don't know how many alpacas she has. She'll have to tell us, and dogs and cats and chicken and everything else. She barely ever goes to the vet. She takes care of everything basically on her own. She's very in tune with her animals, So it's really kind of fascinating, and I thought she'd be really fun to have on the show. And who knows where the conversation will go?
I think it's going to be good.
She's a lot like me too. She's very intuitive, and she'll just go where the energy goes. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Yeah, that should be fun. That's going to be really good. So yeah, something to look forward to for next week's show is a visit from Keiko. And will she be able to take questions if we have any questions from the audience?
Sure. I don't see why not.
Yeah. So if you have a question for somebody who is, what should we call her, an animal intuitive? I'm not sure how she describes herself.
Yeah, she's a holistic healer, animal intuitive. I don't remember how she calls herself either, but
okay. But I guess the point is, if you have a question for somebody, maybe regarding a pet or an animal, send the question in, even though she's not on by name on the LOA Today app form, just send it to my attention or Linda's attention, and we'll make sure that Keiko gets asked the question, but send it in.
I don't know if she'll tune into that. I mean, she may. I don't know if she'll tune into the animal right there and then, because she does like a whole process with them. It's not like a short thing. She has a whole conversation with them. That she's given me back conversations she had with my animals, and she didn't know my animals. I didn't talk to her about their personalities or anything. And the things that came back through the conversation she had with the animals was like, oh my God, how could she possibly know that? The only way is because my dog told her. My cat told her. She had their personalities down, their preferences. It was amazing. So that I think really cool. Takes a little bit of time. I don't know that, boom, boom question, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, it's going to be a fun show either way. That's for sure. I just want to make one note before we sign off for today, and that is, well, two notes actually. First of all, a reminder, download the LOA Today app if you haven't already done that, and use that to send your questions in. Second one, right after this, I'm going to be doing a live show. So if you're in the live stream right now, I'm doing a live show with David Strickle. He's doing one of his summits, his Taya summits. So if you want to be a part of that, just go to the Taya group in Facebook and tune in. I guess there's like 6 of us on the panel, and I don't even know what's going to happen, but it's going to be fun. I know that.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Yeah, absolutely. So anything, I know you don't have any videos posted because you're still trying to figure out when you're going to do it, depending on what Spirit's going to tell you, but anything people need to know about right now?
No, I'm kind of in limbo. They could always go to my website, my YouTube channel. There's plenty of stuff around.
Okay, good enough. Well, thank you very much. This has been a good way to kick off 2021, and wish you again a happy new year and a prosperous new year to you and your family. I'll also wish that to all of our listeners, including the people in the live stream, and we'll look forward to getting Rita back next week. And in the meantime, I'll just remind you to keep doing that high vibe. Come back next time. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.